Oh, there we go. It has two buttons. I know. Okay. Good morning and welcome to the Climate Action Committee meeting for February the 26th. It's my first time chairing, so bear with me. We'll call this meeting to order at 11:02. And we'll do some introductions around the table, please, because we have a new member here today as well. We'll start with Mark.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mark Phillips, CAO. Hello, Mr. Judo. Welcome.
Thank you. Carrie Fougier, Acting Director of Planning and Development.
Carly Rochon, Director of Financial Services.
Jamie Judo is citizen member.
Jim Ivey, Councillor, Windsor South, District 11.
John Ogilvy, Climate Action Coordinator.
Thank you. And I'm Bonnie Smith, chair of this meeting. We'll start with, just a second here. Oh, and we have some joining us online today. Hi, Todd.
Good morning. Yeah, handsome new member there, Jamie. Welcome, Jamie. Very happy. Todd Richard, Director of Public Works, West Hants.
Thank you. And who else is online, Vanessa? Is Shalina there with us?
Yeah, Shalina Thorne, Municipal Operations Supervisor and Emergency Management Coordinator.
Hi, Shalina. Is that it online? Okay. So we're first going to, do I start with this?
Yeah.
Reading of the land acknowledgement. West Hants Regional Municipality acknowledges that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and that this land is governed by the treaties of peace and friendship signed in 1726. West Hants Regional Municipality recognizes that we are all treaty people and have responsibilities to this land and each other. West Hants Regional Municipality also recognizes African Nova Scotians are a distinct people whose history, legacies, and contributions have enriched that part of Mi'kma'ki, known as Nova Scotia, for over 400 years. And Council and I, as chair, are committed to ensuring this meeting and its participants conduct themselves in a respectful and professional manner as outlined in the municipality's Municipal Code of Conduct, meaning presenters, staff, and the public are expected to always conduct themselves in an equally respectful manner while the meeting is being conducted. I thank you all in advance for your commitment to these important meeting principles. Just keep going down all these. Oh, okay. Members are reminded to use the microphones when they wish to speak. Just a reminder to everyone that we are live on YouTube and the meeting is being recorded. Audience members are not permitted to record the meeting on their personal devices. If we need to leave the building due to a fire or other emergency exits are found, excuse me, to the left and right. Towards the back of the room, the muster location is in the staff parking lot. And would John please be the last person out and check that the washrooms are empty? Great. Okay. So we'll start with approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions that anyone has? Nope. We ask for someone to approve that. Do we have to
Move that the agenda be accepted as circulated.
Thank you, Councillor Ivey.
Second.
Seconded by CAO. All those in favor, raise your hands. Motion carried. Right? Great. Okay. Next, we'll go to the approval of the previous minutes, which were circulated. Is there any changes to the minutes? Nope. That's for approval.
Move the agenda the minutes be approved as circulated.
Thank you. Second? Seconded by Citizen Member Duto. I'll get this right. All those in favor? Okay. Motion carried. And we will. Oh, look, I had notes for that. We'll move on to new business, carrying right along here. I will now turn it over to Coordinator Ogilvy for the updates.
Thank you, Chair. As you'll note in the agenda, most of these are just updates this time for the committee at this meeting. Sorry. I'll start with an update on the transit feasibility study, which council has identified as a major priority and is identified as part of the Climate Action Committee work plan for 2025. And so since the fall of last year, when we were denied funding from the Sustainable Communities Challenge Fund, I've been working with the Provincial Department of Natural Resources and Renewables to look for funding to develop a feasibility study for a transit system. As part of that, because it's a Climate Action Committee priority and to enable us to get funding, it will be a zero emissions focused transit study. But the municipality has received $80,000 from the province to support such a study, with the municipality putting up a $20,000 commitment towards that study for a total approximate budget of $100,000 for the study. So right now I'm working on an RFP for that, so we can look at getting consultant services who will perform that study for us. If there are any questions on that before I move on to the next update, I'd certainly be happy to take them.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Ivey.
Chair, through you to Planner Ogilvy. Any sense of timing on that, John? I know you're just sorting funding, but we'll see that taking place this year, do you think? Can you just
Our
Broad-brush.
deadline with the funding opportunity from DNRR is March 31st of 2026. So it will be completed this year.
Great, thank you very much.
Does anyone online have any questions?
Madam
Okay.
Chair. Just, I was going to say for the round table, but maybe just a supplementary piece there too. Carrie and I, and maybe others are aware, the Joint Regional Transportation Association has been renamed and is restructured and some pieces around it. So I'm sure, John, you'll be in synchronization with them a bit. I'm sure there's some information exchange. Who knows? I mean, I know you're looking at West Hants, but there's bound to be some synergies between us and the work that they've done and how we connect not only in our community and outside. So I was going to save it for the round table, but maybe this is an appropriate spot just to make that note that they have new leadership, they have new structure, and there's actually a press release that was released Thursday of last week. So maybe we can share that with you and you could distribute it to the rest of this committee. Is it, like I say, probably has some kind of relationship with the work that you're about to undertake or the consultants. Thank you.
Yes, through you, Chair, I believe CAO as their mandate is changing and how they are structured and organized is changing. I think that kind of connection will be a little more prevalent. In their previous mandate and iteration, they were more focused on higher level transit. And that's when we determined that we would probably still need this study. Because that was one of the first questions was why would we do a study if the JRTA is looking at these things, but they weren't focused on the localized aspect. But now if you guys have information and there is more discussion to be had with them, I think we should definitely look at that and see where I can synchronize some of those efforts with them to make this as strong of a study as it can be for us.
I'm not sure who had Director Michelle.
John, and this may be a question that is more operational, but what length of time are we putting the RFP out, and what stream of procurement are we using?
I haven't gotten that far yet with it, Director Rashawn. It was just last week that we signed the contribution agreement with the province. So I'm still working on those pieces so far.
Councillor Ivey.
Thanks, Chair. So just one other question, John, if I could. You'd made reference that with not getting the funding last year, so this would be a zero emissions focused. Can you just kind of define that out for us? Is it as obvious as it seems to be, or are there other parameters that surround that? So zero emissions by way of transit.
Yeah, so that was one of the suggestions when I was talking with the staff in DNRR about how we could look to have a better chance of getting funding for this study, was focusing it on zero emissions, because a lot of their funding is focused around how can we improve the energy transition and how we can use transit focused solutions to reduce people's impacts on the environment. So it will be specifically focused on a transit system itself that is zero emissions. So whether that's electric buses or some form of alternative fuel that is zero emissions. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Nope. We'll go on to solar installation.
Thank you, Chair. The update on the solar installation is in regards to the small scale solar that the Climate Action Committee has set aside funding for in the past couple of years. Now that the solar feasibility study, the technical work is all complete and we have a report. I'm looking at this year at actually building a small scale solar installation. And so as part of the budget request that I'll discuss a little bit later, I am looking that council will allocate that same $25,000 allocation towards a small scale solar in the capital budget so that we can actually look this year at actually building something, which would be a major accomplishment for the committee, for myself as well, but also for the municipality, and would be a good start on actually getting us into the energy transition and offsetting some of our electrical consumption with solar.
Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Ivy.
Thanks, John. So we've heard about this previously, and now there have been discussions about the small scale project, but was any decision made as of yet as to the what or the where? Like, would it possibly one of our water treatment plants? I think there were talks previously about ground-based solar, on a far bigger scale. I can say that at council meeting discussion in the last couple of weeks that the identification of the cost of power for the sports complex came up, I think at the tune of about $400,000 a year in power bill that we've got going out there. So can you just give us a little bit on, have we decided on a spot? What is small scale going to look like? And how far would we have to go in order to get something like a sports complex, which is, I realize not small, but have you done anything on that just by way of scope and scale?
So I'll start with kind of what is small scale. Small scale, in terms of the budget that we have allocated in the past couple of years and what we're looking to allocate right now, would be about the size of a system that would offset a home's energy consumption. Now that's essentially not if we don't get any other funding for it. And I'm hoping to leverage that $25,000 as long as council approves it during budget deliberations. I'm hoping to leverage that with other funding opportunities to augment that and make it a bigger system in that case. Sorry. In terms of the sports complex, I would certainly recommend, and we would need on the municipality's behalf, a structural assessment before we ever think about putting solar on that building. A lot of those facilities tend to be built with snow loading specifically in mind. And while solar panels alone don't weigh a whole lot, when you add in the racking on a size and scale that would be on that roof, that would be a big system. Right. And that would cost a lot of money. So we would certainly have to get a structural assessment of the building first. But that's certainly something, if council identified that as a priority, we could go forward with. Yeah.
Thank you. And I mean, in the order of magnitude of this, it's like going back to the early days of computers, and none of us knew what a bit or a byte was, or how much it took to do what a page was in, what that worked out to be space wise. So same thing with solar and energy. No idea what we would require by way of solar panels, whether they were on the ground or on the roof, to cover that cost. I mean, so that's the reason for the question. It might be something that could be informational later on, that, well, you'd end up having to take up, a space 3 times the size of the sportsplex to do that, or just anyways. But thanks for the scheme of what's going on with that.
Okay. Any other questions for Director Rochelle?
So just going back to the sports complex, I do think at one point there was a structural assessment done. I Might have been in very early, but there was at least a leads assessment because we made the building leads building. And I do feel like we discussed what solar panels would look like on that roof based on the weight. So I do know that that was a former question at one point. I can't tell you when that came up, but it might require a little bit of digging, which might also help in your planning process when you come back.
Thank you, Director Shaw. I'll look deeper for that. I didn't realize that it had ever been done with the sports complex, so I'll look into that and see if that has enough information for us and it's been signed off on by a structural engineer that that building has the capacity. Then we could certainly, discuss that and have council discuss that about the size and scale that would be required to look at that and putting solar panels on that roof, because that building is certainly a huge contributor to our electricity consumption and our energy bills, and also, of course, the associated greenhouse gas emissions with that.
Any further questions on solar installation? Nope. Okay, 4.3, climate and health vulnerability assessment.
Thank you, Chair. So this is actually a new initiative. I just got word of, it might have been, I think it was just last week that we had provided a letter of support. The municipality had to Nova Scotia Health when they requested funding from Health Canada to perform a climate and health vulnerability assessment in the central zone for Nova Scotia. So that includes HRM and West Hants Regional Municipality. And so Nova Scotia Health will be performing that climate and health vulnerability assessment throughout the central zone to help determine some of the places that are at risk of health impacts due to climate change or significant events that happen in regards to climate change, whether that's extreme heat or drought or any of those other things that may have significant health impacts. And so in providing that letter of support, I received word last week that they were successful in their application to Health Canada for funding to perform this assessment. So I will be looking soon. I think in March, they'll be starting up some discussions and information on where they're going to go with this and some of the particulars about what they're going to assess and what they're going to be looking at. So that will be another very beneficial sort of assessment to the municipality when we're looking at some of our facilities and some of our specific places, how vulnerable they may be to climate impacts, but also to our population within the region and how vulnerable they may be to some of these impacts, and how as an organization, we support people when emergencies happen. And so if we can help have something that helps us determine when these climate impacts happen, what places are vulnerable or most vulnerable and are most at risk, we may be able to mitigate some of that risk and work towards keeping those places less vulnerable in the future.
Safe to assume human health that we're talking about versus protection of property and erosion or shoreline. So it's human health. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, is there any further questions?
Just, Madam Chair, just
Sure.
kind of curious, Carrie, as you folks keep referring to the regional planning review and, floodplain mapping and maybe some of that stuff. So it could be in synchronization with some of the work you're doing, some of the flood assessment piece, whether it's low elevation and or storm surge or whatever. So maybe some of that stuff helps to paint a picture, which may influence policy as we kind of keep going down that road. Okay.
No other questions on this one? No? Okay. Okay, well, thank you, John. 4.4, budget requests.
So this topic item with the committee, I really wanted to just go over what I have put forward to Carly in the finance department and for council to consider during budget deliberations. But I have requested that we carry over the $25,000 in capital for the solar installation. I've also requested that we separate out $20,000 line item for the transit feasibility study. And then essentially I've also requested that we keep the the $30,000 that we set aside for the work plan budget each year. Now, unfortunately, as a backup, we had intended to use that work plan budget to help support the transit feasibility study. When it came up that we were unsuccessful in our previous funding application last year, we used it to backstop our discussions with the province and DNRR. Now, unfortunately, because of the timing of when we found out we were successful with them, it hasn't given me enough time to use any of that budget this year on anything specific. However, if we can separate out the transit study and now we know we're successful, we can use this coming year the $30,000 in the work plan to achieve other items that are in that work plan and actually get other things specifically done.
Okay. Thanks. Is there any questions on this one?
Sure.
Council Ivey.
So just for to start with, just clarity on the 30,000 for the as part of the work plan. So is that general for items that are in the work plan, or is that the review and work it takes to update the work plan each year? Like, what can you just define that for me before I?
That is actually set aside to complete items in the work plan. Yeah. Whether that's renovations to facilities to improve energy efficiency, or a lot of the time we use it like we were doing with the transit feasibility study to backstop a funding application as a municipal portion, because of course that way it makes greater use and we get more money out of it, right? But it can be used for any item in the work plan specifically.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So just a couple of items I may on Madam Chair, I may just kind of roll a couple here. So one is, so we know there's the property protection program that we have that's just renewed, the flood protection program. That is not part of, does not fall underneath your budget. Is that correct? That's coming underneath another budget, the 480. Yeah.
Director O'Shawn can probably speak to that better, but it is within
So-
the CAC stuff.
Yeah, the 480 or the 480 expense will show up in the CAC budget. 80,000 of that is funded through the reserve. So we'll see incoming revenue coming from the reserve.
Got it. Okay, so I guess, so where I was kind of leading with that is that, so with the importance of climate change and all the things that we want and need to get done, the list is substantive that you've got in front of you, John. But so given that the property protection plan, flood protection plan is pretty specific to current events taking place and so on, it just seems to me that what we have for a budget there, aside from that, which came about the end of last year, that we don't have much in there for doing initiatives that are within the climate action plan space. So there's two things. One is the dollar amount that could or should might be better allocated within that area, and two is your capacity to do more. I'd be a bit concerned actually when we look at what we have taking place, and we'll to the comment just made by CAO Phillips, that the protection that we talk about here is human health and the like, but the property aspect of it, or the infrastructure aspect, and what we could be doing there, and those are things that I've picked up on and going back through the former climate action plans of Windsor, Hansport, and the like, and initiatives in there, and some of them which carry forward things that, do we need to move that budget up in some fashion? And if we did, does the capacity exist to do more?
We'll try that one. No, only that. So if a heat pump's being installed at the community center,
Mhm.
that's a community development related expense. That's
Right.
going to be there in that area. John may help administer, he may help advise, either as part of the work plan. So it's not unlike the AT committee, like some of these initiatives, especially when it comes to infrastructure. Solar related, probably John only stays in that world. Heat pump, other efficiency, second phase pumps and pumping stations that maybe in Todd's world, those are going to be cost allocated in those various departments where John may be engaged, but he wouldn't be administering those
Fine.
as projects. So I think that's where he needs to find that 30,000 to do some of the things specific to him, but there are other climate related initiatives throughout the greater operating and capital budget for which he'd be a resource versus a project administrator.
Got it. Thank you. And for sure, there's those initiatives. And I mean, my mind is mostly on flood just because of all we've got going on with that. So is there anything else that we could or should be doing in that regard and I don't want to get this in so much into the public works realm of thing with diversion of stormwater and so on, but are there things that could be done on people's properties to retain and hold water that we don't think to do these days? I mean, it's the water lands on our properties, it rolls down, goes into the French drain and down into the storm system. But are there initiatives like that we could be doing that would pull back on what's landing in the system in some fashion? And so that's where my head is at and it's not just that, but other initiatives that would facilitate that people and property protection as part of our mandate. And I guess that's probably all I have to say on that. I know, look, GHG gas emissions are very important too, but they're not causing pain, at least that we see or know, to our community today in that same way as we see with the other things. So that's the reason for the question as we go through the budget. I think important that we're doing what we can in that regard. So anyways, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Are there any other questions? No. Go ahead. Sure.
If I can, through you, Chair, to Councilor Ivey as well, if council decides through budget deliberations they want to allocate more money towards climate action, I would certainly always welcome that. But that's also balanced with council's many other priorities and many other projects. And like CAO mentioned, even the stormwater diversion and everything through public works, those are major line items that are really improving our resilience to climate change. They don't show up in this budget though. And so I would certainly always welcome that and welcome that discussion. And if there's anything I can do to support you and council and the committee in terms of getting numbers and getting ideas and stuff like that, I certainly am willing and able.
I have two quick questions, I think. So you mentioned unsuccessful applications with grants and things that we've applied for. Do we know what makes them unsuccessful? Why we're not getting some of those grants?
They don't really go into detail as to why they're unsuccessful. I've asked them for feedback before and it's still very generic even when I ask in detail. We've applied for the Sustainable Communities Challenge Fund on behalf of the municipality twice, once in 2023 and then once in 2024. Once in 2022 and once in 2023. And then it was about 8 to 9 months later, we were notified that we were unsuccessful. The first time we applied for a solar installation to actually, like capital funding to actually build an installation. And from my understanding, it certainly would have helped us to have a study in place at that point beforehand, which we didn't have.
Okay.
So I think that would have helped support that application. Our application in 2023 for a transit feasibility study, I'm not totally sure why we were denied that, and they haven't given me a whole lot of feedback as to why, other than it is a very, very backed up request for funding, and they only get limited money to work with. I believe it's approximately $30 million around, and in a province of this size, that doesn't go very far when you're asking for that many projects, right? So I'm not totally sure every time, but I certainly think with our application to the transit feasibility study, we were trying to be a little bit flexible too and didn't specifically highlight the zero emissions originally. But when I got feedback from DNRR in discussions with them, we highlighted the zero emissions portion, and that's what got us that funding or helped certainly.
Okay. Are they federal or provincial or both?
All provincial so far.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No federal ones.
Not there are federal opportunities for funding for transit studies. We've missed those ones in terms of timeline.
Okay.
But now that we have this opportunity, we won't have to look specifically at those. But there are other federal sources for things like building renovations and stuff like that I'm always looking at all the time.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions for John regarding the budget requests? Anybody online? Nope, they're quiet today. Okay, moving right along. Business arising from the minutes. Does anybody have any? No business arising from the minutes? Okay, we'll move on to our roundtable discussion. So we'll just go around and see if anybody has something they want to discuss for a minute or two, and we'll start with CIO Phillips. Uh-oh, put you on the hot seat.
I'm sure there's a few things, but I will not take any more time. No, I'll leave it at that. I think the JRTA was what was on my mind. Just that again, new structure, not necessarily a completely different mandate, but it's changing. The name has changed, and some of those pieces just to make sure that. And I know community development with respect to their active transportation strategy will probably hopefully be able to connect and link to whatever's happening in that JRTA world as well. So nothing further from me, Madam Chair.
And Carrie, because I can't remember your title.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe just a couple updates from the planning side of things. So in terms of solar, we did receive an application earlier this year, and it's in the queue now for a agrivoltaic system at Kings Edge Hill. So it's a new type of land use for our community. So it involves a rezoning, but also adding a new definition and permitted use into that zone through our land use bylaw amendment. So that's an exciting project on the go. I believe it's going to PAC the next meeting in March 13th, I believe it is, for consideration there, and then it'll continue to move through the process. There was a public information meeting and site visit earlier this month, and I believe it was well attended and lots of great questions and discussions around that. And further to the solar conversation, we are still working through the plan review and considering larger solar arrays, solar farms, I guess we can call it. Through that process, they're currently not really contemplated through our regulations and policies. So that's something that we're looking at there for future solar farms. On the wind farm side of things, we received notification from the province in January on our amendments to our MPS and land use bylaw for wind farm policy criteria and regulations. So those are in effect now, and they speak mostly to setbacks and other criteria that we will now consider when looking at wind farm applications. And further to that, the Bear Lake Wind Farm, which I believe the committee is familiar with from previous, they pulled their application and resubmitted under this new criteria. So that is now in the queue for consideration at also the upcoming PAC meeting. The application remains the same. It's an 11 turbine wind farm within our municipality, and then 4 additional turbines just outside of our boundary, and it's in the upper Vaughan area. That's all I have.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Carrie. Director Shaw.
I don't really have too much right now, but we are heading into our second kind of phase of our budgeting process. So of course, looking at what initiatives we can kind of highlight as we're going into our next deliberations on budgeting relating to capital works associated to climate action, as well as many other committees that we have that are doing very important work in our facilities. So
Okay, thank you. Mr. Judeau.
Nothing major for me. This is a learning opportunity for myself as well, getting into this, but the transit feasibility as well as the climate health assessment in particular really stand out to me. And we've digging into that. Once I get a little bit more boots on the ground here with this, I want to, I think that's going to be, I think those two in particular,
Mhm.
going to really stand out for us here. So.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Ivy.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, appreciate the discussion that we've had here this morning on the different aspects that that we're currently looking at and those that we are. I think there was a change that just took place, right? Heard or read about with Switch West Hants. Can I just ask, are you able to expand on that? Maybe, John, as we get to you, just because I know that's a program that we launched a year ago or thereabouts, and just where we are presently with it. Are we getting uptake? And it looks like we're expanding it in some fashion. If you could just touch on that, would be great.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Councillor Ivy, you kind of preempted me a little bit. That's okay. Yeah, so the Switch program, we currently have 21 full participants now, which is meaning I have their agreements on hand. They have been signed by the homeowners. And they're taking part. They've completed, between those 21 participants, they've all completed over 32 individual projects, because some of them do a heat pump and insulation, and those are counted as two separate projects. So we are certainly getting uptake. We've seen a lot of uptake since the start of fall recently, and it's sped up and kind of stayed at that higher uptake, which is really nice to see, because it's a really important program for improving people's homes, their comfort, and their energy affordability. But it's also certainly great to see in terms of a program that we've worked so hard to launch and market and ensure that it's accessible. Yeah, so recently we actually were able to secure with the lender that's providing the bulk of the funding, along with the municipality for the program, an interest rate decrease. As the rates from the central bank have come down, we've been able to secure a rate decrease from our lender that we're working with, and so they've decreased by almost a full percentage point, I believe. So now interest rates on those loans have gone from 8.5% to 7.7%. And so that's factored into the math in terms of a person's affordability and in terms of how long it will take them to pay off a project based on their savings. But we've also gone through and we've extended the loan term for solar projects specifically from 10 years to 15, as we're seeing fairly low uptake on the solar side of things. And what we've identified in partnership with Switch, who's helping us administer the program, of course, in their other programs, they made that switch quite a while ago from 10 to 15 years for solar. And a lot of that's because the payback for solar usually averages around 11 to 13 years. So that 10-year loan term, just the math doesn't work quite right for your savings, right? And most solar systems, when they're installed, are guaranteed for 25 years. So you're looking at another additional 10 years approximately of savings. So we extended that term to make the payments more affordable for homeowners and hopefully increase that uptake on the solar side a little bit for people. Yeah. That's all I
That's
have.
what you had. Our online members up there, Director Richard.
Sure. So just a couple things for discussion of interest. I was fortunate to attend a presentation by the town of New Glasgow. They did a feasibility study on power generation. One was to look at, they have several pressure reduction chambers like we do in our utilities. The possibility of, generating power through those things, because, reducing the pressure certainly generates electricity or energy. So they wanted to convert that to electricity. So they did that feasibility study through CBCL. However, it turned out to be a very long-term payback. The cost per PRV chamber was in excess of 300,000. So the 20-year loan, the payback, exceeded that 100-year life cycle cost. So it turned out, very expensive to do. Certainly, it could generate some electricity, but the payback certainly wasn't feasible. The other thing they looked at is a micro hydro turbine located at their water control structure at Forbes Lake in New Glasgow. So essentially, the water dam spills water, generating electricity through that spillway, putting a micro hydro in there. That turned out the payback was less than 20 years, so certainly feasible from a cost perspective. So they're looking at going to the next step, more detailed design and the regulatory approvals. So very interesting presentation. I shared that with John. Not sure if anybody on the committee is interested, but there's some documentation on that. And the other thing, more localized to us, we're going through a third phase expansion at the Falmouth sewage treatment plant. So designed for adding that development capacity. And we're also going to add in that RFP, to tentatively look at the possibility of generating methane. We do generate methane through our digesters. So to try to capture that methane, maybe turn that into some heat generation for the plants. So we're looking at that too. So always nice to look at those things, but the bottom line is they're very expensive to undertake. Like the feasibility study in New Glasgow. So having partners do that in other municipalities. So because we're asked, we have many water control structures in our treatment plants, and methane and digesters in our sewage treatment plants. And also our lagoons, like there's heat in those lagoons. And we talked about before, possibility of heating buildings through our sewage treatment plant production, because that's warm water coming in. Can we generate, heat from that? So, but there is a cost associated with one is the feasibility study and also the capital cost to actually make that happen. So, but those are good reports. Yeah, I'm sure, John, if anybody's interested in those, you can share those with the committee members. So that's it for me.
Definitely. Thank you. Vanessa.
I just wanted to mention that the municipality, we did apply for a community fund grant from the Office of Healthcare Professional Recruitment. And as part of the groundwork for that application, community development staff actually interviewed our clinics, hospitals, and our long-term care facilities. And the number one thing that came up regarding needs for retention and attraction of healthcare professionals was local transportation. And that transportation also went from HRM into West Hants, because right now the bus service that's there stops, I believe, in Mount Uniacke. So they don't have, healthcare professionals don't have a way to get out this way to work. And so I just wanted to mention that all of them that we interviewed did mention transportation, local and into West Hants as well as local.
Okay. Thank you. Was there anything else? No?
Nope.
Okay. Shalina, are you still there?
Yep, I'm still here, and
Hi.
no, I have no updates at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. That's it. Good. Okay. Moving right along to public comments, and it's pretty empty over there, so no public comments today. Okay, is that it?
It's the
Next meeting date? Okay. Our next meeting date is April the 9th of 2025, unless something urgent comes up in between, and John will let us know. If that's everything, we'll adjourn the meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Jamie? And second? Director Rochelle? Perfect. Meeting is adjourned. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
That wasn't so bad. And to wait till the